mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiging sa sinamanan, alam ng puso sa likid mo'y buhay. Upang pinirang, weka ng magiting, sa manlulubin. Kita pasisigil sa nagkakatulong sa sinulang sa langit ko bagaw. Ay nilagang tulakaw sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang matawag ko'y katumpay na nagtitigil. Ang ituwid na parang yang kailan ang kanyang nagtitigil. Lumanang araw ng warhanin pagsingka, huwag namin sa akin mo. Ang higaya ng pagkay marami, ang mamatay ng kahit sa'yo.
Okay, ang check-in time, tamang-tamang programa natin, 35 minutos. Pasado alas 7. Kala ko hindi ko nagka-program ng umaga, no? Okay, pag-open ko hindi medyo mabagal ang internet, no? Okay, Huwebes ngayon, no? 11 po ng Enero 2024. Okay, ang pasok ng programa natin, no? Okay, dito naman tayo sa consolidated news natin. Okay, mga mahal kong kababayan, mga suki, no? Okay, dito po sa ADLSNTV Corporation. Okay, dito po sa Halo-Halo Special Opinion Balita at iba pa. Kasama po sa Servisyo Publiko Tinig ng Mamamayan. Ayan. And then, ang sumbungan ng mamamayan, okay, kasama rin dito po sa programa natin, no? Okay, babati muna ako. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Magandang umaga. Ayan. And then, universal greeting natin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, mga kababayan, no? Ayan. Okay, wala muna doon sa bakbakan ng balita. Dito tayo sa lokal. Okay, tungkol po kay Pastor Kibuloy, mga suki, no? So kayo na po makinig kung ano po gagawin sa kay Pastor Kibuloy, mga suki. Okay, itong Secretary of Justice. Okay, may balakin po. Okay, kay Pastor Kibuloy, no? Apollo Kibuloy ng Davao City. Pagka natin ito. Okay, kung ano ang naku, nawala, no? Bakit yun ang pumasok? Ayan po, mga suki, mga kababayan. Ito na po. Bakit lumipat doon yun? Okay, si Remulla handang isuko po si Pastor Kibuloy sa Amerika. Okay, tingnan natin po kung anong, bakit ko ganun, mga suki, no? Okay, kasi in-extradite, okay, itong si Pastor Kibuloy, mga kababayan ng Amerika. Okay, sa sangkatutak, okay, mga kaso nakabinbin po rito kay Pastor. Okay, Kibuloy po ng Davao City, no? Okay, pakinggan natin ito, no? Ayan. Okay, kayo na po makinig. Okay. Sa balita ito, no? Okay, go ahead.
Idiniit ng pamahalaan na silang makipagtulungan sa Estados Unidos kaugnay sa kaso ng founder ng Kingdom of Jesus Christ at tele-evangelist na si Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. Ayon kay Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla, susunod ang pamahalaan sa extradition treaty sakaling hilingin ng Amerika na ipa-deport si Kibuloy. Habang ito rin ang naging pahayag ni Solicitor General Leonardo Guevara nang ito ay naupong kalihim ng DOJ sa ilalim ng Duterte administration noong 2021 nang inanunsyo ng US DOJ na sinampahan si Kibuloy at dalawa pang iba ng kasong sex trafficking by force, fraud at coercion. Iginiit ng pamahalaan na silang makipagtulungan sa Estados Unidos kaugnay sa kaso ng founder ng Kingdom of Jesus Christ at tele-evangelist na si Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. Ayon kay Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla, susunod ang pamahalaan sa extradition treaty sakaling hilingin ng Amerika na ipa-deport si Kibuloy. Habang ito rin ang naging pahayag ni Solicitor General Leonardo Guevara nang ito ay naupong kalihim ng DOJ sa ilalim ng Duterte administration noong 2021 nang inanunsyo ng US DOJ na sinampahan si Kibuloy at dalawa pang iba ng kasong sex trafficking by force, fraud at coercion. Iginiit ng pamahalaan na silang makipagtulungan sa Estados Unidos kaugnay sa kaso ng founder ng Kingdom of Jesus Christ at tele-evangelist na si Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. Ayon kay Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla, susunod ang pamahalaan sa extradition treaty sakaling hilingin ng Amerika na ipa-deport si Kibuloy. Habang ito rin ang naging pahayag ni Solicitor General Leonardo Guevara nang ito ay naupong kalihim ng DOJ sa ilalim ng Duterte administration noong 2021 nang inanunsyo ng US DOJ na sinampahan si Kibuloy at dalawa pang iba ng kasong sex trafficking by force, fraud at coercion. Iginiit ng
Okay, sandali lang. Tatlong beses na. Latest po pang from Gaza, pakinggan natin ito mga kababayan, no? Ito na, ito naman.
On all fronts. Israel has been playing with fire, attempting to drag Hezbollah into an all-out war in Lebanon after assassinating a senior Hamas leader with an airstrike in Beirut. Days earlier, the Israelis assassinated an Iranian commander in Syria. But if Israel can't defeat Hamas's Qassam brigades, which are operating under the harshest conditions from inside of the siege death camp, how on earth do they think they can even begin to properly face the much larger and far more powerful Hezbollah without severe consequences? Hezbollah has so far responded to Israel with a balance of power and restraint, asserting its deterrent capacity while avoiding full-scale war. Meanwhile, the U.S., despite public pronouncements of wanting to contain the genocide to Gaza, has in the last week killed Yemeni naval officers for blocking ships in the Red Sea and assassinated an Iraqi commander in an airstrike in Baghdad, all to protect Israel's ability to continue carrying out its genocide unimpeded. As the imperialists climb higher and higher up the escalation ladder, it's becoming clear that Israel and the U.S. are behaving like rogue and reckless states, while the resistance axis are the adults in the room. The restraint and patience of those the U.S. labels terrorists is the only reason the Middle East isn't on fire right now. But the longer the genocide in Gaza goes on, and the longer the U.S. and Israel provoke their adversaries, the more likely regional war becomes. So what happens next? Can Israel even win militarily? Can the U.S., if regional war breaks out? What might that escalation look like in the coming days, weeks, and months? And who decides if and when the big war breaks out? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by veteran war correspondent and analyst Elijah McNair. Elijah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on to give us some military analysis of what's taking place across the region. And I want to go across the different fronts. Before we get into some of the recent developments, I just wanted to point out that you were one of the first correspondents to visit Sabra and Shatila back in the 80s after the Israelis oversaw essentially far-right Lebanese massacre of Palestinians in these two camps. And, you've seen from that what the Israelis are capable of. I mean, it's one of the most horrific massacres to take place throughout the Lebanese Civil War. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that and relate it to what we're seeing in Gaza.
Well, actually, I covered the Israeli invasion to Lebanon in 1982, and I very much remember when the Israelis bombarded all the media offices in West Beirut, and they were very upset about the coverage of all the media, including the Americans, the French, the Italian, the Spaniard, everybody. And I remember that the Israelis at that time killed more than 18,000 people when they have surrounded Lebanon or Beirut, and then they broke into most part of Lebanon. And one day I received a call from an officer in the Lebanese army who was a first lieutenant at that time, and with whom I had some good contacts as a journalist. And he asked me around the middle of the night if I know anything about firearms taking place in the camps of Sabra and Shatila. And I said, no, I hadn't heard anything. Because at that time the Israelis were imposing curfew in the city, And as a journalist, I should have lived, it was possible for me to make a run. But it was dark, it's no electricity, nothing, because we had no water, electricity, and it's more or less exactly the same case of Gaza, apart from the intensity of the bombardment. And he said that he had a small unit inside the camp who were referring to him, telling him that they were confronted with a group of armed people, instructed them not to come out, whatever they hear or whatever happened outside. And they reported that to the command, and this officer phoned me. So I have decided to go and have a look. So it was around midnight, and there was nobody in the street. It was completely black. And I walked out of my office in a very down street, going down towards the right, toward the city, the sportive city that was called, and the UNESCO area. And this is where I found an Israeli checkpoint that stopped me because it was only the checkpoint and I walking toward in that direction. And then I identified myself as a journalist and I said, I'm going to the flat where I stay. So I had to lie because I really want to go and have a look at what's happening. So I walked in the middle of the night until I reached just a few hundred meters before the beginning of Southern Shikula, and that was the roundabout of the Kuwaiti embassy. And before that, there were the houses of the Lebanese officers. It's a place where it is still there, but it is built for the Lebanese officers to give for a free rent or whatever. And this is where I heard a lot of firing coming just ahead of me and on my left-hand side. And the left-hand side was the Palestinian camp. So because it was dark and I didn't want to be shot at without being able to identify myself, I waited until the first light of the morning. And then I ventured outside where I stayed all night on the stairs. And then I saw in front of me, just not very far, a large number of vehicles of South Baghdad, the pro-Israeli Lebanese army that controlled the south of Lebanon, and several Israeli vehicles that were standing doing that. So I waited and then they left and I went to the roundabout and then turned left and then left again into the camp. And inside the camp, I saw piles of a lot of the ground with a work of a bulldozer, and I could have seen many legs and arms and bodies coming out. And then I went into inside the camp, and I saw like more than 15 people that were all killed against the wall because one can see all the bullets behind them. And I grabbed a number of ID cards, and they were Lebanese ID cards. So there were people, Lebanese people and Palestinian people. So I went around and I saw many bodies in the street and people who were very scared, were still alive, but just shyly looking outside the door just to make sure that they're not going to be killed next and that those who were doing the killing had left. And then I took the IDs and scanned to my office, wrote the story, and then called my friend, who is a retired general today, and informed him after I found the story about what happened. So I delivered all the IDs to the police center that is not far from my office, and this is where I have learned and saw as the first eyewitness the massacre of Southern Turkey.
Wow, and you can imagine, I mean, that's happening essentially, something that's along those lines is happening every hour in Gaza. It's just one separate after another. And so I want to move on to who's winning and who's not winning. I mean, we're hearing different versions of who's winning from each side, which makes sense. But like, I want an objective analysis of who is. But first, I think one of the most significant things that happened this week was the assassination Saleh al-Arouri, the deputy head of Hamas's political bureau in Beirut earlier this week. He was killed in a drone strike by the Israelis, which was a very significant escalation. And you covered some of your views on this assassination, the circumstances around it, and the other targets that were killed along with Arouri. So I'm curious if you can offer your analysis about the significance of that assassination. And I mean, if you hear the Israelis talk about it, you would think that this was like a huge victory for them to take this guy and his associates out. Was it a major victory for Israel?
Response has to be very carefully studied to the point that is painful enough, but not too painful.
Yeah, it's quite a difficult balancing act. It's, and I must say, I mean, the level of patience and restraint that the forces of resistance across the region have to have, it's pretty stunning. You look at the way that they behave, and there's so much strategy and thought that goes into every decision they make because, like you said, they don't want all-out war, whereas the U.S. and Israel are just completely reckless and just keep playing with fire. And real quick, before I go to my next question, I do want to thank Tarani Ahmadi Parker and Nestor Gonzalez for the donations, the super chat, and also remind everybody who's watching to make sure you like this episode. It helps boost us in the algorithm so more people can see Elijah give his very informed analysis, which you will see on CNN. But Elijah, I want to, since we're not talking about other parts of the region, I want to move to the issue of Lebanon for a moment. You know, Nasrallah gave 2 speeches this week. I know you watched both of them. And there was a few things he said that I thought were interesting that he hadn't said before. One thing in particular was that the decision for Hezbollah to enter or to open the Lebanon front on October 8th was made, of course, in large part to, in solidarity with Gaza to help relieve pressure on Hamas, which they've certainly done by diverting a lot of Israeli army resources to the northern front. Or their southern front. But moreover, for the first time, he said that this was also done as a preemptive way to prevent Israel from launching a parallel attack on Lebanon. And when I say attack, I mean an all-out attack on Lebanon. And we have seen in both the U.S. and Israeli media, it's been revealed that the Israelis did, in fact, have a plan to launch a war in conjunction with its war on Gaza, also on Lebanon, preemptively, to get rid of Hezbollah, as they were also trying to get rid of Hamas. That, of course, didn't happen. The U.S. media claimed it was because Biden put a stop to it. The Israeli media said it was because Netanyahu put a stop to it. Regardless, they're both of those states claiming that that was in fact the case. So that was one thing he said. And another significant aspect of what, at least I think, another significant aspect of what he said this week was what you also mentioned, which is that they have no choice but to respond because Israel only understands force, and it's clear at this point the international community will protect no one, so only those with weapons and strength can protect themselves. So I just mentioned that all as some background to ask you, when we talk about Hezbollah's role in this broader regional war on these different fronts, what are Hezbollah's red lines? We know they don't want all-out war, right? We know a lot of these different forces of resistance don't want all-out war, but obviously there are red lines. So what would have to happen for Hezbollah to say, okay, all bets are off, all limitations are off, we have to go to war, we have no choice? And furthermore, what are Hezbollah's capabilities? And obviously their capabilities are huge because they do have strategic deterrence against Israel.
Okay, so let us take Sayyid Nasrallah, Hezbollah Secretary General's words without taking what he said for granted. And let us see if we can understand if what he said is right or practical or was really true what he was saying. So first of all, if Israel understands the force or not. We have seen in the West Bank and Gaza how the Israelis treat the people in Gaza and the resistors in Gaza, and how Israel treats the West Bank. So the West Bank is supposed to be under the control of the Palestinians. There are more than 4,500 Palestinians arrested from the West Bank since the 7th of October, and 380 Palestinians killed in the West Bank, what's supposed to be the Palestinian state. Moreover, on the 7th of October, Hamas asked the release of 7,000 prisoners from the Israeli jail, of which 6,700 of the West Bank. These people who don't have weapons as the resistance in Gaza and don't want to fight. So if you happen and you are strong, the Israelis are more afraid of you. This is what's happening in Gaza today. Of course, they're bombing, but are they managing to stay in one place? Of course not, because there is an armed resistance that can confront them. In the West Bank, they go in, they kill, they assassinated people. We've seen on videos how they kill 1, 2, 3 youngsters unarmed, and they leave it unaccountable. This is why, if you're not strong, then you are eaten alive. Secondly, Hezbollah are capable. When I said that Hezbollah is going to respond intelligently, but hard enough to make sure that Netanyahu understood the message, it's because before the 7th of October, there is any operation of war will have a bank of objectives. And the bank of objectives is related directly to the capability of the organization. So we have Hezbollah, it's a non-state actor, it's a it's an organized group, it's an organized army, but it is a non-official army, but an organized. So it has the level of any army. So for that, they look what they have. For example, the surface-to-surface missile. So we're talking about how Hezbollah can hit all the oil platforms that are opposite to Israeli shores, close down the harbor of Haifa and Ishtu, and close down the airports. What is the choice there? So all these are very painful for the Israeli economy that is suffering today between 18 billion and going up potentially to 58 billion according to the Israeli information media. Therefore, that can really hurt the Israelis without grabbing to war. So without causing a war, Israel can hit these targets. Now, Hezbollah can hit these targets. Now, is Hezbollah capable of hitting these targets? Well, we know for sure that Hezbollah has the Yaqut missiles that are supersonic missiles, and they have been given by Syria. So yes, Hezbollah has the potentiality to hit these targets with missiles that are very difficult to intercept. Secondly, Hezbollah has kamikaze drones, much more advanced than the one used in Ukraine, with a more powerful explosive in the warhead. Can one drone reach Beach, for example? Of course, yes, it can. Because in the last 2 weeks, a drone launched from Iraq reached Beach. And why that was launched from Iraq? It's intelligent. It's an intelligent move. Because the purpose is not for the Israelis to turn against the Lebanese and to escalate and go and hit other objectives than the one between 2 to 5 kilometers that Hezbollah asked the Israelis indirectly to remain the exchange of fire within this limit. This is why we understand that Hezbollah can hit oil platforms. Moreover, there are other missiles that Iran has that are much more powerful than the Yaqut, and that Hezbollah has. And I'm sure Hezbollah will be delighted to show them in due course. So now we're talking about hitting the Israeli economy. What about hitting other targets? We've seen Hezbollah using the Vulcan rockets, which are between 250 to 500 kilograms of explosive. But there are Vulcan that has not been used so far with the capability of 2,000 kilos of explosive. So can you imagine for the first time the Israelis tasting what the Palestinians have been living under for the first time? It will, don't want to take it terrified, even if it causes no casualties. But the mere fact they can see a hole of 6, 7 meters in the ground and think how this can form on their head, they will never return to the northern borders. And there are already more than 100,000 Israeli settlers who left the borders to Iraq, and they are living in tents because there are no more places in hotels. So they are again refugees for the first time, and they are living and experiencing what the Palestinians have been living since 1928. Because for people who don't know, most of Gaza is made of camp. The barrier camp, Beit Yahun camp, Han Yunis, everything in Gaza is made of camps. So now the Israelis are also living in camps and they understand what that means. Already the Israelis are telling the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister they don't want to return and let the problem with Hezbollah solve, and the Israeli cabinet doesn't have a solution for Hezbollah on the northern border. So that's one of the capabilities. Other capabilities, today the war is an intelligence war. So the person or the organization who holds the largest number of missiles and the heaviest missile carrying the largest number of explosives is the one that stands out. Now we know that Israel has that, but is Israel ready to receive all the missiles that come from Hezbollah? Now Hezbollah has other missiles that are precision missiles. We're talking about the Packet 110, the Packet 313, and all the series of the Packet that vary in range, with one difference that Hezbollah has modified these missiles. Why? Because Hezbollah doesn't need a range of 400 to 800 meters, kilometers to hit Israel. Hezbollah needs to hit Haifa and Tel Aviv, and they are within 20 to 60 kilometers. So instead of having a missile, precision missile that can carry only 450 kilograms of explosive, it can carry much more for a lesser distance. And people would think, what is the Iron Dome? Well, let's take the Israeli statistic that the Iron Dome is capable of intercepting 55 to 60% of the missiles. Well, I want to add another bonus to the Israelis and say 70%. So we have only 30% of Hezbollah missiles that can go through. Now it's very easy to flood the Iron Dome with hundreds of missiles from day one. Well, I expect thousands, not hundreds, on a day one. And after that, Hezbollah can maintain between 400 to 500 missiles and rockets on daily basis for over a year. This is what I think Hezbollah has prepared the arsenal for. So if the Hezbollah flood the Iron Dome, most of the precision and heavy missiles will go through. But I accept with 30%. So out of 1,000, we have 200 only managing to go through. I think there are enough to cause major destruction in Haifa and Tel Aviv that will teach the Israelis a lesson they will never forget. Of course, Israel has the capability to turn Lebanon into the dark age and to a cave. But the next cave will be an Israeli one, because Hezbollah has the capability to do exactly the same by only hitting this sensitive area that Hezbollah showed throughout the years with its vanquished objectives in Idlib. All the details of the location and the coordinate of every single position.
It's really important, everything you're pointing out. And of course, it's absolutely true. Nobody's questioning whether Israel has superior air power. We know they do. We see what they can do in Gaza, and they could easily carpet bomb all of Lebanon. Everybody knows that. But the question becomes, are they willing to pay the price for that? And you just laid out the price for that. And with Israel, it's a country that needs security to keep its settlers there. If you get rid of that security, like you said, people leave. People have already left. And
The next point
please.
is about if Hezbollah was next. And when Said Nasrallah said that Hezbollah would have been attacked, and that would have been attacked. Now, I want to argue that what he's saying is pure speculation. But let us see if that is possible. So, if Hezbollah remained watching what's happening in Gaza without interfering and doing nothing at all, Israel would have allowed the presence of, let's say, 10,000 soldiers on the borders because Hezbollah is not reacting, and Hezbollah and Israel managed to mobilize more than 450,000 men on the 7th of October and within the first 2 weeks, which means that the Israelis were prepared for a large war and a big war on multiple fronts. This is why they have told the Americans from day one, and the Americans send their carriers, they've sent 2,000 Delta Force to Tel Aviv, they've sent generals, they've sent another special forces to Israel to support them. They say they are in reconnaissance about Gaza, so the British, but we know what reconnaissance means. So they are there, and they are there to support Israel, because Israel said on the first day, I am not capable of facing the axis of the resistance. I need help. And Biden said, which showed the weakness of Israel, by the way, and Biden said, I am going to send you the help that you need. Now, with this presence and the readiness of the international community to accept war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide committed against the Palestinians, nobody is going to blink an eye against Hezbollah. On the contrary, Hamas and Hezbollah, in the eyes of the Americans, are considered terrorist organizations. And this definition belongs only to the Americans. It is not a universal definition, because there is no definition of terrorism. And what is terrorism for the Americans is freedom fighter for the Palestinians, in case of Palestinians, and the same applies on government or Hezbollah. So, who is going to care about what's happening to Hezbollah? And exactly the same narrative that Hamas is hiding behind the children and women of Gaza. The same would be used in Lebanon, that Hezbollah is hiding behind children and women of Gaza. So what's going to happen is the war on Gaza will be very swift, quick, and destructive, much more than it is today. The resistance in Gaza would not have had the time to breathe, and the bombardment would have been devastating. And can you imagine 400,000 men, if we need 50,000 to level it, 400,000 men or 300,000, because the commander needs to be part as a reservist to inject in the battlefield on time, depending on which area and on which front. So let's say 300,000 men attacking Gaza in one go. They will manage to destroy and occupy and destroy everything before they move in. So after finishing Gaza, in this euphoric moment of victory, so that will be a victory for Israel, for Netanyahu and his right-wing, far-right wing. Because, I mean, this terminology is not right, because Netanyahu is far-right too. So in the Likud party is more far-right than the far-right. So let's consider let's talk about the main far-right Smotrich and Ben Gvir and all the rest of the band. So with these Philistines, they would happily move immediately on the Lebanese front and attack them. And the whole international community will applaud Israel, because Ursula von der Leyen went to Israel and said, Europe stands with you. Although she doesn't speak in the name of Europe, she's not the representative of Europe abroad. It's just correct. Secondly, she doesn't speak in the name of the European foreign policy that is never united. It's always non-united, and it's always in clash with one another. Thirdly, the Canadian, the German, the Australian, the Americans, the French, the British, everybody supported Benjamin Netanyahu and will do exactly the same in Lebanon. But by starting the war, Hezbollah did something very clever. First of all, by accepting to be engaged in the war, it has changed the deployment of its 7,000 special forces at the borders. Secondly, it has evacuated all the positions that are known in preparation of war without being surprised. Thirdly, has prepared in learning the experience of dealing with the Israelis by watching and taking lessons from what's happening in Gaza and how the Israelis are dealing with Hezbollah on the borders. So all these are lessons to be learned. What is going to be and in which shape is going to be the next war? This is very important for those in every single resistance group and school around the world, but also all the military around the world are watching what's happening in Gaza and drawing lessons because there are many lessons to be learned in this experience that the Israeli army has never experienced before. Because the Israeli army moved into the city after the bombardment, not before. So they flattened the area and then they moved to reduce the casualties. But they don't understand that they are today faced with a resistance equal to what happened in 2006 in south of Lebanon, where they destroyed and then they were met face to face with Hezbollah in small villages in the same house sometimes, on the ground floor and on the upper floor, or 2 meters one against another. So all these are lessons learned from this war, and they are very valuable. This is why Hezbollah cannot be surprised today, and this is why Israel can no longer declare war on Hezbollah or on Lebanon. And another point is Hezbollah showed the capability of the most advanced version of the laser-guided anti-tank Hornet missiles. Not only the double one, but the one that reached 7 to 8 kilometers, a weapon that has never been used before. And that tells a lot because no Merkava tank, Merkava 4, Israeli tank, can cross the border and be within range of any Hezbollah before being totally destroyed because the distance of range is of 4 kilometers. So there's no way Israel can invade there. However, there is a potentiality that Israel can destroy the villages on the south of Lebanon, but also all the settlers will never return home.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, this is unprecedented. And in today's speech, Nasrallah did make the point that it's ironic for all this, all the years since Israel's founding, the people of the South have constantly been displaced and massacred. And now for the first time, the tables have turned, and now all these settlers in the North have been displaced. Elijah, I want to zoom out, before we start to wrap up here, I want to zoom out a bit on the region. But before I do that, I want to remind the audience that please do like this show on YouTube, like the episode on YouTube. It helps in the algorithm. I think it's fantastic. There's 1,500 people, more than 1,500 people watching, which is great. But I see only 561 likes. So let's boost that up to at least half of you. Come on, guys. Like the show. It helps us in the algorithm. All you have to do is click the thumbs up. It's super easy. Sorry, Elijah, I have to constantly scroll our audience. But anyways, moving on, I want to zoom out to the region because we're talking with the fronts that Israel's fighting, which is Gaza and Lebanon. And of course, it has a nonstop help from the U.S. weapons shipments and the U.S. aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean. But the other fronts, the U.S. is the primary aggressor, if you will. And here I'm talking about Iraq, and I'm talking about Yemen. Syria, it's kind of a mixed bag. Israel hits, the U.S. hits. But in Iraq, you mentioned that just the other day, I think it was yesterday, not just the other day, the U.S. assassinated PMF commander in Baghdad, which was pretty unprecedented, at least in the last year or so. We haven't seen that sort of thing take place. And also, this is somebody who's technically a part of the Iraqi security forces, because the Hashid, the PMF, has been folded into the Iraqi security forces. So that was a pretty big attack on Iraq's sovereignty by the U.S. And then a few days earlier, the U.S. attacked or sank 3 Yemeni ships and killed 10 Yemeni naval officers. All of this is, of course, an attempt to shield Israel from the consequences of its genocide in Gaza. But, this, what I think is interesting in all this is that, this is the U.S.'s deterrence, the U.S. and Israeli deterrence across the region has kind of collapsed, because despite the fact that they keep killing people, keep assassinating people, the resistance axis across the region is going. The Yemenis are still doing what they're doing in the Red Sea. The Iraqis are still hitting U.S. bases. I mean, this is not the Middle East of 2003, when the U.S. could just invade Iraq without any consequences. There exists this resistance axis across the region that is firing back. So I'm curious, your thoughts when we talk about a potential regional war here. That could happen. The longer Gaza goes on, the longer the likelihood of regional war could happen. Given that there are actually 2 sides this time, what would that look like? What would it look like for the U.S.? What would it look like for Israel? And we know that they're capable of doing an extreme amount of damage, but could they even win? Oh no, did I lose you again, Elijah?
So first of all, I think
I thought it froze. I hear you now. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think you complain about the lighting. You're very likable, but I think I am the problem here.
Yeah.
So now, I don't think there is going to be an all-out war for a simple reason. It's very easy for the Houthis to block the Red Sea to all navigation and to say no more ships can cross here, and that's it. So that will bring the problem to another level, because the Americans have taken on their shoulders the protection of all the seas as a superpower, and they cannot look like incapable of assuring the navigation in international waters. This is why the Ansarullah were very limited to one thing, saying, lift the sea from Gaza, we allow you to receive all nationalities. So it's only limited to Gaza, for people not to divert the attention away from what's happening to Gaza. And it's not going to be in the future, any Ansarullah step that will divert the attention away from Gaza. That's for Yemen. Now, for Iran received a hit yesterday in Kerman, and there was a communique issued by the Islamic State that an insult to any intelligent person, because it was written with so many mistakes. Anyone who's following the Takfiri or these jihadi groups understands that the language was so poorly made to say, it is not me, but it is me. So just there are mistakes that were made on purpose to say, yes, it is not the Islamic State, but we want to say it is the Islamic State, to say that it is us. Because the Islamic State doesn't call Iran by Iran, but Khorasan, and they don't call fighters, they say Mujahideen or Istishhadiyeen. So there are another language and another terminology, to the point that an amateur understands it. This is why the fake communique was on purpose distributed to be highlighted as fake, and to understand that behind it are intelligence services. But Iran is not going to respond in a way to divert the attention and to make it as if it's really the Iranian war. There are other ways to respond, but not now. Now, many people are frustrated when they don't see an answer, because they think this kind of war is run on Twitter or on X or on social media. It is not. It's much more sophisticated than that. It is okay if the public is not pleased for this country or this group not answering in the way they like. Or perhaps this group has promised that the circumstances can change. If today Hezbollah, for example, to fulfill the promise and to say Beirut in exchange of Tel Aviv and Hezbollah bombs Tel Aviv. This is exactly what Netanyahu wants. And he wants the war to be diverted away from Gaza. So it is counterproductive for Hezbollah to do so today because in a time of peace, Hezbollah can do it because it's so obvious. You bomb the capital, you bomb the capital, what you consider your capital. But in case of war, all the rules of engagement change. Because of that, the war is not run on social media. And because it is not run on social media, there's no space for tit for tat. And there is no space for you hit me, I will hit you immediately. No, you're going to be like Christian and turn the other cheek and then wait for the time when the time comes to know how to hit back. And to hit back when it is not going to create circumstances where it is counterproductive or damage Palestine or damage the Palestinian people or damage the Palestinian cause or damages further the children and women of Gaza. It is important to continue and keep the focus on what's happening in Gaza and Gaza only. If Israel takes 7 or Iraq, it's okay. The Iraqis are containing themselves. Or they have missiles even more than Hezbollah, by the way, because they are an official army and they have warehouses that can destroy the more than one American military base willingly. And the Iraqis can receive its and accept casualties much more than the Americans. Well, they blocked 1 million person during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and they are ready to lose 10,000 with a result to destroy Al-Aqsa totally and completely. But what will be the position of the Americans in this case? Will the American people accept to lose so many men and women in service only to protect Hezbollah, not to protect Benjamin Netanyahu's position because it's a personal war. Now Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to enlarge the war only to stay in power. He understands he can't achieve any objective. This is why he is fighting and doing everything possible to stay in power. So why Iran or Iraq or the Ansarullah or Hezbollah will give him such a big favor and then go and fight an all-out war and start launching missiles that they have just to show they have the potentiality to do it? Well, Israel knows that all these groups are capable of damaging Israel. It's enough. They don't need to show their strength in the wrong moment.
You know, I just really quickly, before we finish up here, I want to ask you to respond to a couple of claims that I constantly see, like uttered by the people who support Israel. And one of those claims is that Hamas is losing. It's on the verge of defeat. The Israelis are winning. I hear that. I'm actually always stunned when I kind of poke my head into the conversations that they're having, because they seem to believe their own propaganda. I'm not talking about the Israeli leadership here, because I think the Israeli leadership is a bit more realistic about what's happening, especially the military leadership. But those mostly in the West who support Israel really do think that the Israelis are winning. and that the U.S. and the Israelis have control of the entire region. And when I look at what's happening, after I've listened to everything you've said, yes, of course, they're causing so much devastation, but I just don't see that at all. And I think it's really important that you frame this as Netanyahu's war, because I think what we've seen from October 7th onwards is that this particular Israeli leadership is perfectly willing to sacrifice their own people to stay in power. But anyways, just how would you respond to that claim that you'll hear is that Israel's winning? Palestinian, I mean, Hamas is on the verge of defeat. Israel's winning. Hezbollah's weak. Yemenis are weak. Iraq is weak. They don't have our power, and they don't know what's coming to them.
People around the world are divided into different categories. Those who support Israel blindly, and no point in discussing them, and those who don't want to be informed, and those who are informed by mainstream media, and they are not guilty because they don't know. And the fourth one is those who are not willing to be informed and to take the cover to look for the reality. Perhaps they don't have the time to do so. So I can start with one single word. When people, particularly in America, they say, you cannot be anti-Semite. I fully agree with that. Because if I am anti-Semite, it means I am anti-Palestinian. Because anti-Semite is anti-Palestinian, or anti-Lebanese, or anti-Southern Syria. These are the Semite people. But no, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Likud party, and before him is Shamir, and before Netanyahu, Ariel Sharon, and all the people who left the country, they offered a false narrative by confiscating certain terminology and offering a completely different story. First of all, this is not a religious war. There is no point in people saying, I am a Jew and I am proud of supporting Israel. There is no connection. Because there are so many Jews against Israel. Because when you say you are a Jew, you're indicating the religion. That's your business. The war is about land that have been taken and given from the British. And the decision was in 1917 by Lord Bedford, who decided not to give it to the Jews, but to give it to the Zionist movement. It is in his declaration. Anyone can go on the internet and look at Bedford Declaration 1917 that was given from Lord Bedford to Lord Rothschild. So it is not about the Jews. The Palestinian Jew, because I say Palestinian Jew, because Golda Meir on YouTube, you have her saying, since 1921, I am a Palestinian until 1948, and I carry a Palestinian passport. These are the words of Israel's Prime Minister. He said, I am the Palestinian Jew, the Palestinian Christians, and the Palestinian Muslims lived together for decades. And all those who live in Palestine, who originate from the land, are Semites. So when you say you cannot be anti-Semite, it doesn't mean I am not anti-Israel. It means I am not anti the Semites who live in that part of the world. And if you look on Google, Semitism is a language. It is not Israel. It has nothing to do with it. So if we are informed about the terminology that we are using, then we start understanding what is the conflict about. It's about a population that used to live in the land, and someone else came from abroad, created groups, the Haganah, the Stern Gang, the Navy, and they are recognized as a terrorist group, and start killing Arabs and British. And some of them, like Ishaq Shamir, killed also Jews. So this is what it's about. It is about the Israelis who form the country don't want a place for the Palestinians to live with them. Now, some people say Hamas doesn't recognize Israel. In 2018, Hamas accepted the two-state solution. Hamas recognize the presence of Israel as a reality that they can live with, but the Israelis don't want them. As the Israeli ministers say, let us move Gaza, let us destroy Gaza. That's the divide. So when you say who's winning, it depends. If you look at who killed the largest number of children and women, Israel is winning. If you look at who killed the largest number of United Nations personnel, no, Israel is winning there. Hamas did not manage to kill not even one US personnel. Is who destroying all the schools and breaking into hospitals, destroying them, preventing cutting water and electricity. Israel is winning because nobody can impose collective punishment but Israel. So in these terms, Israel is winning. So what I think is important is for people not to take sides, but to go and educate themselves about the what's happening. See how many Jews stand against Israel. See how many Israelis stand against Israel. Look at Haaretz newspaper; it doesn't stand against Israel and what the Israelis are doing. I have so many Israeli friends who stand against Israel and the killing of the children and women. Who stands against the killing, the massacre of children and women? How can you say why Israel is killing 22,500 civilians and respond, oh, because of the 7th of October? Are you justifying the killing of 22,500? Are you justifying the collective punishment? Are you justifying the break of international law, the non-respect of the Geneva Convention, everything? We live in a jungle only because we support Israel. So going down, people, and then I'm extremely happy to be considered.
Well, Elijah, I want to thank you for joining me to break all of this down. Before we end here, can you just tell people where they can follow your work?
On my Twitter account, and they can subscribe, and I will be very grateful.
Elijah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, mga suki mo ka. Break muna ako and then parinig kong isang itong pagbisita naman ni Widodo. No? So local naman tayo. Ayan. Okay, si President Joko Widodo nasa kasalukuyan po sa Manila, no? Okay, mag-visit sa atin. Okay. Okay, pakinggan natin na itong si Joko Widodo, no? Ayan.
Manila and Jakarta agreed to strengthen cooperation on a number of sectors during the state visit of Indonesian President Joko Widodo in the Philippines. Katrina Domingo reports.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo's visit in Malacanang sealed the commitment between the Philippines and Indonesia to further bolster their cooperation in the fields of economy, energy, security, and defense.
President Widodo and I had a fruitful and honest discussion on regional events of mutual interest, such as the developments in the South China Sea and ASEAN cooperation and initiatives. The Philippines and Indonesia affirmed our insistence on the universality of UNCLOS, which sets out the legal framework that governs all activities in the oceans and in the seas.
Aside from agreeing to forge more deals on border security and patrol, Widodo also asked for Marcos Jr.'s support in a possible deal to procure anti-submarine warfare aircraft for the Philippine Navy from Indonesia.
I welcome the strengthening of cooperation on border security, including through joint patrols, but there are many things still need to be improved.
Meanwhile, the Philippines and Indonesia also signed a cooperation agreement that guarantees the two countries would aid the other should there be critical supply constraints in the energy sector. Indonesia is one of the world's largest producers of coal, needed to generate power in coal-fired power plants. The energy deal also includes opportunities for both countries in the fields of energy transition, renewable energy, and alternative fuels. The president of Southeast Asia's largest economy says his country is ready to further expand their investments in the Philippines.
In order to enhance trade, we agreed to continue to open market access, and Indonesia seeks the Philippines' support related to special safeguard measures on Indonesian coffee products.
Special safeguard duties is a trade mechanism that the country can impose on imported products that fall below a so-called trigger price. The Philippines decided in March this year that it will continue slapping such duties on imported coffee products if the items are below the trigger price to protect local farmers. Bilateral trade between the two countries was pegged at $9.5 billion in 2021. Indonesia has been importing copper wire and other machine parts from the Philippines, while the Philippines has been sourcing coal, palm oil, paper, and other materials from Indonesia. Katrina Domingo, ABS-CBN News.
Philippine trade deficit, meanwhile, widened to $4.7 billion in November. The shortfall in the balance of trade and goods declined by 25.3%. This was larger than the $3.7 billion in the same period in 2022. The U.S. was Manila's top export destination, alongside Japan, China, and Hong Kong.
A new World Economic Forum survey lists election disruption from artificial intelligence as the top global risk this year. AI-derived misinformation and disinformation came in as the most severe global risk in the study released Wednesday. With half of the world's population heading to the polls this year, the report said foreign and domestic actors may leverage misinformation and disinformation to further widen societal and political divides. Other big risks identified by respondents include extreme weather events, war, and economic weakness. Major economies heading into elections this year include the US, Russia, South Korea, and Taiwan.
Meanwhile, Asian markets ended today's trade on a sour note, also from jitters on U.S. inflation data. The Japanese benchmark Nikkei 225 bucked the trend, closing at a near 34-year high. That's on heavy buying from chip makers and hopes the Bank of Japan will extend its ultra-loose policy. Now, here at home, Philippine shares retreated to the 6,500 level on what one analyst described as a healthy pullback. Value turnover, though, was up to a significant 11.5 billion pesos.
Since the Fed actually penciled in three rate cuts in 2024 back in December 14, the local index, if you remember, has already rallied by about 6%. Mm-hmm. So from below 6.3 to a high of 6.30 in the last 2 days. So for me, a 6% move inside just 2 to 3 weeks is quite substantial already.
Here are some stocks to watch out for. We're monitoring shares of Amazon after Bloomberg reported its streaming unit Twitch will cut 35% of its staff. Amazon shares are up 0.4% in pre-market trading. Also in focus, shares of British fast food chain Greggs after it reported a strong rise in sales, indicating that inflationary pressures are easing. Shares of Greggs have since soared by 6.5%. We're also keeping a close watch on shares of UK supermarket chain Sainsbury's after it retained its full-year guidance. Looking at its shares, it's down by 4.5% in midday trading. Foreign direct investments into the Philippines significantly declined in October. The Bangko Sentral says the $655 million net inflows was lower by nearly 30% from the same period in 2022, monetary authorities rather point to higher debt instruments of $504 million for the decrease in net investments. Equity capital placements also plunged by 54% or to $74 million from the previous $163 million. Most of the placements were from Japan, the US, and Singapore, and were channeled to manufacturing, real estate, and the financial and insurance sectors.
Okay. Saan ang salamin ko? Dito muna.
at walang titinan, walang kinatulugan at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
Okay, mahaba ng balita natin. Paalam tayo mga suki, no? Okay. Ay.
Awesome! Awesome! Awesome!
Okay, dito po magtatapos ang programa natin. Babalik tayo mamayang hapon. Okay, sa programa ng Halo Special Opinion Balita at iba pa. Okay, kasama po sa Servisyo Publiko Tinig ng Mamamayan. Okay, kasama po ang sumbungan ng mamamayan, no? Okay, mamayang hapon balita tayo. Okay, pinarinig ko lang yung mga materials yun. Para kaalaman natin doon, no? Okay, hindi na ako magpaligoy-ligoy. Haba na po na consume natin ng oras, no? Okay. Ayan. Okay, wala tayong masamang tinapay. This has been Abs naman lamang po, no? Bye-bye na.